The year was 2247, and humanity had finally done it. After centuries of looking up at the night sky and wondering if they were alone, they had built a ship that could travel faster than light. The vessel was called the Dawn Horizon, and it was the pride of Earth. Captain Li Wujin stood on its bridge, watching the stars blur past the windows as they jumped through space for the first time. Wujin was a calm man with steady hands and sharp eyes. He had been a pilot since he was young, and now at 42 he commanded the most important mission in human history. His crew of 60 men and women worked quietly around him, checking instruments and monitoring systems. Everyone knew what this mission meant. They were going to find other life in the universe. They did not have to wait long. 3 weeks into their journey, near the edge of what humans called the Andromeda border, the sensors detected something. A convoy of ships, 12 in total, moved slowly through the dark between stars. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built. They were smooth and curved, made of metals that seemed to glow with soft blue light. Wujin ordered his crew to send a greeting. They broadcast messages in every language of Earth, along with mathematical patterns and images of humanity. They waited. The alien ship stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a beam of light swept over the dawn horizon, scanning it from front to back. Wujin felt his heart beating fast. This was the moment. First contact. But the alien ships did not respond. They simply turned and flew away. Disappearing into the blackness of space without a single word, Wujin stared at the empty screen for a long time. He did not understand. Had they done something wrong? Were the aliens afraid? He ordered the ship to return home. Earth needed to know what had happened. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. Humanity had found alien life, but the aliens had ignored them. Some people felt excited. Others felt confused. A few felt angry. But most people simply wanted answers. Dr. Kim Yuna was one of those people. She was a scientist, brilliant and focused, who worked at Earth's largest research station. Her specialty was communications, and she had spent years studying signals from deep space. When she heard about the alien encounter, she became obsessed with finding out more. For weeks, she scanned the stars with the most powerful equipment humanity had. She searched for any signal, any message, any sign of the aliens who had ignored them. And then, one night, she found something. It was an encoded transmission, bouncing between distant points in the galaxy. Yuna worked for 3 days without sleep, breaking the code piece by piece. When she finally understood what she had found, her face went pale. The transmission spoke of something called the Galactic Concord. It was an alliance of 43 different species, spread across thousands of star systems. They had governments, armies, trade routes, and laws. They had existed for over 10,000 years, and they had a rule about Earth. Humanity was not welcome. The transmission called humans primitive and dangerous. Warned other species not to contact Earth. It described humanity as violent animals who could not be trusted with the secrets of the stars. The Galactic Concord had watched Earth for centuries and decided that humans should be left alone, locked on their small blue planet forever. When Yuna showed her findings to the leaders of Earth, they did not believe her at first, but she had proof. She had intercepted hundreds of messages, all saying the same thing. The galaxy knew about humanity. They had simply chosen to ignore them. The leaders of Earth held an emergency meeting. They decided to send a diplomat to the Concord to speak for humanity and ask for a chance. Ambassador Han Sun-woo was chosen for this task. He was a skilled speaker, a man who had ended wars with words and built peace between nations. If anyone could change the minds of the aliens, it was him. Sun-woo traveled for months to reach the Concord's capital, a massive space station called Orbis Prime. It was larger than any city on Earth, a ring of metal and light floating in the void. Ships from dozens of species came and went, carrying goods and passengers. It was the heart of galactic civilization. Sun-woo requested a meeting with the Concord's leader, being called High Arbiter Volan. Volan was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black glass. He agreed to meet the human, but only in public. in front of representatives from all 43 species, the Great Hall of Orbis Prime was filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some had scales, some had fur, some had no bodies at all, and floated like clouds of light. They all watched as the small human walked to the center of the room. Sun Wu spoke clearly and proudly. He told them about Earth, about humanity's dreams and hopes. He asked for a chance to join the galactic community, to learn and grow alongside other species. He promised that humans would be good neighbors, good partners, good friends. When he finished, there was silence. Then High Arbiter Volan began to laugh. The sound was cold and sharp, like breaking ice. Other aliens joined in, their strange voices filling the hall with mockery. Volan raised one long hand, and the laughter stopped. "You're animals," Volan said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Violent, stupid animals. Your history is nothing but war and death. You kill your own kind for land, for belief, for power. We have watched you for 500 years, and you have not changed. You will never change." Sun Wu tried to speak, but Volan cut him off. "The Concord has decided. Humanity is forbidden. No species will trade with you. No species will speak with you. No species will help you. You will stay on your planet until you destroy yourselves, as we know you will." The High Arbiter waved his hand, and guards moved toward Sun Wu. The meeting was over. As Sun Wu was escorted from the hall, he heard Volan announce the isolation mandate. From this day forward, any species that contacted Earth would be punished. Patrol fleets would blockade human space. Earth would be cut off from the galaxy forever. The journey home was long and quiet. Sun Wu sat alone in his cabin, staring at the wall. He thought about what Volan had said. He thought about the laughter in that hall. He thought about his people, looking up at the stars with hope, not knowing that the stars had already rejected them. When the dawn horizon finally returned to Earth, crowds gathered to hear the news. Leaders from every nation waited for Sun Wu's report. Cameras broadcast his face to every screen on the planet. Sun Wu stepped forward. His eyes were hard, and his voice was steady. "They have made their choice," he said. He said nothing more. He did not need to. Every human who heard those words understood. The galaxy did not want them. The galaxy had locked the door and thrown away the key. But humanity had never been good at accepting closed doors. 6 months passed after. Ambassador Han Sunwoo returned with his terrible news. In that time, something strange happened on Earth, something that had never happened before in all of human history. The fighting stopped. For as long as anyone could remember, humans had been divided. Nations argued over borders. Religions clashed over beliefs. Rich and poor fought over resources. But now, for the first time, every human on Earth looked up at the same enemy. The aliens who had called them animals. The aliens who had locked them away from the stars. The United Nations held its final meeting on a cold morning in January. Leaders from every country gathered in the Great Hall, and they did something extraordinary. They voted to dissolve their organization. In its place, they created something new. They called it the Terran Sovereignty. It was not a union or an alliance. It was a single government for all of Earth. Every nation gave up its military, its weapons, its secrets. Everything was pulled together under one command. One purpose, one goal: breaking the blockade. Admiral Park Jin-ho was chosen to lead the new military. He was a quiet man, 60 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and won them all, not through anger or cruelty, but through patience and strategy. He understood that war was not about rage. It was about planning. On the day of his appointment, Jin-ho gave a speech to the people of Earth. He stood in front of a massive screen showing the alien patrol ships that circled human space like hungry wolves.
"They called us primitive," Jin-ho said.
His voice soft but steady. "They called us violent. They said we would destroy ourselves. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps humans are violent. Perhaps we are dangerous." He paused and his eyes grew hard. "Let us show them what violence truly means." The crowd roared. People who had once been enemies now stood shoulder to shoulder. united by a common hate. Deep beneath the mountains of Korea, Dr. Kim Yuna led a secret project. It was called Project Prometheus, named after the ancient god who stole fire from heaven and gave it to humanity. The project had one goal: to steal the secrets of the stars. 3 months after the isolation mandate, Concorde patrol ship made a mistake. It flew too close to Earth's moon, and its engines failed. Before the crew could call for help, human ships surrounded it and forced it to land. The aliens inside were treated well. They were given food, water, and comfortable rooms. But their ship was taken apart piece by piece. Yuna worked day and night, leading a team of the brightest scientists on Earth. HFY studied the alien shield generators, the weapon systems, the faster-than-light engines. The technology was thousands of years more advanced than anything humans had built. The Concorde believed it would take humanity centuries to understand it. Yuna understood it in 3 months. She did not just copy the alien technology. She improved it. Human engineers found weaknesses in the Concorde designs and fixed them. They made the shields stronger, the weapons more powerful, the engines faster. When Yuna presented her findings to Admiral Jinho, he smiled for the first time in months. "They thought we were stupid animals," he said. They were wrong, while Yuna worked on technology. General Choi Minji built an army. Minji was a small woman with sharp features and a sharper mind. She had spent her life studying war, not just human war, but every conflict she could learn about. She knew that fighting aliens would be different from fighting other humans. She needed soldiers who could adapt to anything. She created the Iron Legion. The soldiers of the Iron Legion trained for 2 years without rest. They learned to fight in zero gravity, in the vacuum of space, in the cramped corridors of starships. They wore exoskeleton suits that made them faster and stronger than any alien infantry. They practiced hand-to-hand combat until they could kill in their sleep. Mingi pushed them hard. Harder than any soldiers had ever been pushed. Many broke under the pressure. Those who survived became something more than human. They became weapons. In secret shipyards hidden inside asteroid fields, the Terran sovereignty built its fleet. 200 warships, each one carrying weapons that the Concorde did not know existed. The ships were painted black, invisible against the darkness of space. They had names like Vengeance, Defiance, and Thunder. The flagship was called the Sovereign. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built. A mountain of metal and fire. Captain Li Wujin was given command. The same man who had witnessed humanity's first rejection would now lead its response. The Concorde patrols watched human space. But they did not see the fleet. They believed humans were still primitive, still building their first proper starships. They did not know that behind the patrols, behind the blockade, army was waiting. Admiral Ginho spent long nights studying the enemy. He watched recordings of Concorde battles, analyzed their tactics, learned their weaknesses. The aliens were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They had not fought a real war in over 2,000 years. Their soldiers were soft. Their commanders were lazy. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy who was not afraid to die. Jinho knew that humans were different. Humans had been fighting since they first picked up stones and sticks. War was in their blood, in their bones. The Concorde had made a terrible mistake by reminding humanity of this. Ambassador. Han Sunyu spent those 2 years preparing the words that would follow the weapons. He knew that victory in battle was not enough. Humanity needed to win hearts and minds across the galaxy. He studied every species in the Concorde, learned their languages, their cultures, their fears. He discovered that not all of them supported the isolation mandate. Some had been forced to join the Concorde. Some were treated as lesser members, ignored and exploited. Sun Wu saw an opportunity. If humanity could show strength, perhaps these oppressed species would join them. The Concorde was not as united as it appeared. It was a tower built on fear, and towers built on fear could fall. On the night before the attack, Admiral Ginho gathered his commanders on the bridge of the Sovereign. General Minji stood ready, her Iron Legion loaded on transport ships. Dr. Yuna monitored the weapons systems she had designed. Captain Wu Jin sat in the pilot's chair, his hands steady on the controls. Jinho looked at the blockade fleet on the main screen. 50 alien ships floating in formation, certain that the primitives behind them posed no threat. 2 years ago, Jinho said quietly, they laughed at us. They called us animals and locked us in a cage. Tonight, we show them that this animal has teeth. He turned to his crew. Every face was hard with determination. Every heart was burning with purpose. They had trained for this moment. They had sacrificed everything for this moment. Jinho raised his hand. All ships, he said. Weapons free. The darkness of space lit up with fire. Commander Threx had served the Galactic Concord for 40 years. He had led fleets, conquered rebellions, and enforced the will of the High Arbiter across 100 star systems. He was feared and respected, a veteran of countless battles, but he had never lost. On the night the humans attacked, Threx was sleeping in his quarters aboard the patrol flagship. He had grown comfortable in the 2 years of the blockade. The humans never caused trouble. They sent no ships, no messages, no threats. They simply sat on their little planet and did nothing. Threx had started to believe that they had accepted their fate. The first explosion woke. Alarms screamed through the ship as Threx ran to the bridge. What he saw on the screen made his blood turn cold. Human ships were everywhere, emerging from the darkness like ghosts. They were not the primitive vessels his intelligence had described. They were warships, sleek and deadly, their weapons already firing. How many? Threx demanded. 200 ships, Commander, an officer replied, his voice shaking. They appeared from nowhere. Threx stared at the screen. 200 ships. The humans had been blocked from all trade, all resources, all technology. They should not have been able to build even one warship, let alone 200. It was impossible, but the explosions tearing through his fleet were very real. Turn fire, Threx ordered. All ships formed defensive positions. The Concord ships obeyed, turning their weapons toward the human fleet. Energy beams and missiles flew toward the attackers. Threx felt a moment of hope. The Concord had the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. No species had ever withstood their firepower. The human shields held. Threx watched in disbelief. As his weapons splashed harmlessly against the black holes of the human ships, the shields glowed blue with each impact, but did not break. Meanwhile, human weapons punched through Concord armor like it was paper. Impossible, Threx whispered. How are they doing this? He did not know that Dr. Kim Yuna had spent 2 years perfecting those shields. She had found a flaw in Concord technology, a frequency at which their weapons were weakest. She had tuned human shields to block that frequency perfectly, and she had tuned human weapons to strike at the frequency where Concord shields were weakest. The humans were not just fighting back, they were hunting. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Captain Li Wujin guided his ship through the chaos of battle. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, dodging enemy fire and returning it tenfold. The flagship was a beast, its weapons roaring with every shot. Admiral Jinho stood behind him, watching the battle unfold. His face showed no emotion, but inside he felt something like satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. The Concord ships were falling one by one, their formation breaking apart. Enemy flagship identified, an officer reported. Commander Threx is aboard. Jinho nodded. Captain Wujin, take us in close. I want boarding parties ready. Wujin grinned. This was the part he had been waiting for. The Sovereign surged forward, cutting through the battle like a knife. Enemy ships tried to block its path, but human weapons tore them apart. In minutes, the flagship was alongside the Concord command vessel. General Choi Minji was already in the hangar bay, surrounded by her Iron Legion. 200 soldiers in black armor, their exoskeletons humming with power. They had trained for this moment for 2 years. They were ready. Remember your training, Minji said, her voice cold and clear. Fast, silent, deadly. No mercy. The boarding craft launched, crossing the gap between ships in seconds. They crashed through the Concorde flagship's hull, and the Iron Legion poured out. Commander Threx had never seen anything like it. Human soldiers moved through his ship like shadows, their weapons cutting down his crew before they could react. Concorde soldiers tried to fight back, but they were too slow, too weak, too unprepared. They had not fought in hand-to-hand combat in generations. Humans had been doing it for their entire history. Mingi led the assault personally. She moved through the corridors with brutal efficiency, her rifle finding targets with every shot. When her weapon ran empty, she used her fists. When her fists were tired, she used her knife. Nothing stopped her. Nothing even slowed her down. In the engine room, a group of Concorde soldiers made a last stand. They barricaded the doors and prepared to fight to the death. Minji did not waste time with the doors. She ordered her soldiers to cut through the walls. The Concorde soldiers watched in horror as human blades sliced through metal that should have been unbreakable. The Iron Legion poured through the holes, overwhelming the defenders in seconds. The last Concorde soldier fell with a human knife in his chest. Still unable to believe what was happening, on the bridge of his ship, Commander Threx watched his crew die. The humans were coming for him. He could hear their footsteps, steady and unstoppable. He thought about running, about hiding. But there was nowhere to go. The door exploded inward, and General Mingyi walked through. She was small, compared to him, barely reaching his chest. But her eyes held no fear, only cold determination. "Commander Threx," she said, "your ship is now property of the Terran sovereignty. Surrender or die." Threx looked at the bodies of his soldiers. He looked at the human weapons pointed at his head. He thought about the High Arbiter's words, about how humans were primitive animals. These were not animals. These were predators. He raised his hands in surrender. The Battle of the Vega blockade lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, every Concorde ship was destroyed or captured. 200 enemy vessels reduced to debris. Human losses were 12 ships and fewer than 1,000 soldiers. It was the greatest military disaster in Concorde history. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly knew their name. The Concorde that had ruled for 10,000 years had been humiliated by primitives. The impossible had happened. High Arbiter Volan received the news in his chambers on Orbis Prime. He listened to the reports of destruction, of captured ships, of Commander Threx's surrender. His gray face showed no emotion, but his hands trembled with rage. "A fluke," he said finally. "The humans surprised us. It will not happen again." He ordered the Grand Armada to assemble. 1,000 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, crewed by the finest soldiers of 43 species. He would crush the human infestation himself. But across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered. If the humans could defeat the Concorde once, could they do it again? Some began to whisper among themselves. Some began to hope. On Earth, the victory was celebrated, but Admiral Jinho did not join the parties. He sat alone in his office, studying reports of Concorde fleet movements. He knew this was only the beginning. The real war was coming. Before he returned to planning, he sent one message to the galaxy. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language, to every corner of known space. "You shut the door," Jinho said, his voice calm and steady. "We kicked it down. And now, we are coming through." The stars had rejected humanity. Now, humanity would make the stars regret it. The Grand Armada of the Galactic Concorde was the most powerful fleet ever assembled. 1,000 warships, each one larger and more deadly than anything humanity had faced before. They carried soldiers from 43 species, all united under the banner of the High Arbiter. Their mission was simple: destroy Earth and end the human threat forever. Admiral Park Jin-ho watched them coming. His scouts had tracked the Armada for weeks as it gathered and moved toward human space. He had only 400 ships to meet them. The numbers were not in his favor. But Jinho was not worried about numbers. He chose to make his stand at the Orion Nebula, a vast cloud of gas and dust where sensors worked poorly and visibility was low. The Concorde liked to fight in open space, where their superior numbers and firepower could dominate. Ginho would not give them that advantage. They expect us to run, he told his commanders. They expect us to hide on Earth and wait for death. Instead, we will meet them here in the dark, where their numbers mean nothing. The Sovereign led the human fleet into the nebula. Behind them, the Concorde Armada followed, confident in their coming victory. They did not know they were walking into a trap. The first battle began in silence. Human ships emerged from the dust clouds like ghosts, firing before the Concorde could react. The nebula scrambled enemy sensors, making it impossible for them to coordinate. What should have been one massive battle became 100 smaller fights, scattered across millions of kilometers. This was exactly what Ginho wanted. The Concorde was used to fighting as one overwhelming force. Their tactics depended on communication and coordination. In the chaos of the nebula, they could not use either. Their commanders screamed orders that no one heard. Their ships fired at shadows, while human weapons found their targets with deadly precision. General Choi Minji deployed the Iron Legion in a way the Concorde had never seen. Instead of waiting for ships to be disabled, human soldiers boarded enemy vessels while they were still fighting. Transport craft attached to Concorde hulls like parasites, and armored soldiers poured inside. The Concorde had not fought hand-to-hand in over 2,000 years. Their soldiers were trained to operate weapon systems and repair equipment. They were not warriors. When the Iron Legion came for them, they died like sheep. Captain Li Wuzhen flew the Sovereign through the heart of the enemy fleet. His ship was faster and more agile than anything the Concorde had, thanks to Dr. Yuna's improvements. He danced between enemy weapons, always moving, never giving them a clean shot. Behind him, human fighters followed, picking off damaged Concorde ships one by one. The Battle of Orion lasted 3 days. When the dust finally cleared, the Grand Armada was broken. 700 Concorde ships had been destroyed. 200 more were captured. The survivors fled back toward Orbis Prime, carrying tales of human demons who fought without fear and killed without mercy. Human losses were heavy this time. 120 ships gone. 20,000 soldiers dead. Admiral Jinho felt the weight of every death, but he knew the cost was necessary. The Concorde had learned that humanity would not be easily crushed. While the battle raged, Ambassador Han Sunwoo was fighting a different war. For months, he had been sending secret messages to species within the Concorde. He had learned from Dr. Yuna's intelligence that not everyone supported the High Arbiter. Some species had been conquered long ago and forced to join. Others were treated as inferior members, denied the full benefits of Concorde citizenship. They were oppressed, just as humanity had been excluded. Sunwoo offered them a choice: join Earth and fight for freedom, or stay with the Concorde and remain slaves forever. The first response came from the Velen, a species of tall, thin beings with skin like polished wood. They had been Concorde members for 3,000 years, but had always been treated as servants. Their soldiers were used as shields, their workers as laborers. They had no voice in the council and no hope for change. When they saw humans defeat the Grand Armada, they saw something they had never seen before: proof that the Concorde could be beaten. The Velen declared independence and allied with Earth. The second response came from the Duri, small creatures covered in golden fur. They had been conquered 500 years ago, their homeworld stripped of resources and their population scattered across Concorde space. They had dreamed of freedom for generations, but never believed it was possible. Now they believed. The third response came from the Korath, massive beings with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. They were warriors by nature, proud and fierce. The Concorde had broken them long ago, forcing them to serve as soldiers in wars that were not their own. They had been waiting for a chance to fight back. The humans gave them that chance. In 1 month, 3 species left the Concorde and joined the human alliance. They brought ships, soldiers, and most importantly, intelligence. The Velen knew the trade routes that kept the Concorde economy running. The Duri knew the communication codes that allowed Concorde ships to coordinate. The Koroth knew the weaknesses in Concord defenses. Admiral Jinho welcomed them as equals. He did not treat them as the Concord had treated humanity. He did not mock them or exclude them. He gave them seats at his table and listened to their advice. "We are not like them," he told the Allied leaders. "We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We fight for freedom for ourselves and for anyone brave enough to stand with us." The alliance grew stronger. Human engineers worked with Velen scientists to improve their ships. Human soldiers trained alongside Koroth warriors. Human diplomats learned Duri languages and customs. What had started as humanity against the galaxy became something more, a coalition of the oppressed, united against their oppressors. High Arbiter Volan watched his empire crumble. 3 species had defected. More were whispering about doing the same. The Grand Armada, his ultimate weapon, had been shattered. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear. His advisors urged him to negotiate. Some said he should offer humanity membership in the Concord. Others said he should offer peace and withdraw the blockade. A few even suggested he should apologize. Volan refused them all. "We do not kneel to animals," he said, his voice cold with hatred. "We will rebuild. We will gather every ship, every soldier, every weapon in the Concord, and we will destroy them all." He ordered the remaining Concord forces to fortify Orbis Prime. The capital station would become a fortress. Every ship that could fly was called home. Every soldier that could fight was summoned to defend the heart of the Concord. If the humans wanted victory, they would have to come and take it. On the Sovereign, Admiral Ginho received intelligence reports from his new allies. He knew what Volan was doing. He knew the High Arbiter was gathering his forces for a final stand. "We thinks his station is unbreakable," General Minji said. "He thinks we will not dare attack." "He is wrong," Jinho replied. "We have come too far to stop now. The Concord must fall, or they will never stop hunting us." He looked at the star map, at the tiny dot that marked Orbis Prime, the heart of the enemy, the throne of the High Arbiter, the place where Ambassador Sunwoo had been laughed at and sent home in shame. "Prepare the fleet," Ginho said. "We are going to end this war." The combined fleet gathered at the edge of Concord space. 600 warships from 4 species, all pointed toward one target, Orbis Prime. Humans flew alongside Velen, Dori, and Koroth. Former enemies, now S. Tood as brothers, united by a common dream of freedom. Admiral Park Jinho stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and looked at the fleet behind him. 2 years ago, humanity had been alone, rejected and mocked by the galaxy. Now they led an alliance that had shaken the foundations of the oldest power in known space. The journey had been long and bloody. They were finally here. The final battle was about to begin. Orbis Prime appeared on the screens like a dark jewel floating in the void. It was massive, larger than any space station humanity had ever built. Rings of metal and light surrounded a central core where the High Arbiter sat on his throne. 300 Concord ships guarded it, the last defenders of a dying empire. This is Admiral Ginho of the Terran Alliance. He broadcast to the station. "Surrender now, and you will be treated with honor. Fight, and you will be destroyed. The choice is yours." The response came quickly. High Arbiter Volan's face appeared on the screen, his gray features twisted with contempt. "You think you have one animal?" he said. "You have destroyed ships. You have taken planets, but you cannot destroy what we are. The Concord has ruled for 10,000 years. We will rule for 10,000 more, long after your species is forgotten." The transmission ended. Jinho nodded slowly. He had expected nothing less. "All ships," he said. "Begin the attack." The Battle of Orbis Prime was the largest space battle in galactic history. 600 Alliance ships against 300 Concord defenders, fighting around a station filled with millions of civilians and soldiers. Weapons fire lit up the darkness like a second sun. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes, their crews dying in an instant. Captain Li Wujin piloted the Sovereign through the chaos, his hands moving with inhuman speed. Enemy ships tried to block his path, but he was too fast, too skilled. He had been flying since before the war began, This was what he was born to do. There, he shouted, pointing at a gap in the station's defenses. That's our opening. The Sovereign surged forward, followed by a dozen transport ships carrying the Iron Legion. Concord weapons hammered at their shields, but they held long enough. The transports crashed through the station's outer hull, and General Choi Min-ji led her soldiers into battle. The fighting inside Arbus Prime was worse than anything they had faced before. The corridors were narrow and filled with defenders. Every room was a trap. Every corner hid an enemy. Min-ji's soldiers pushed forward inch by inch, paying for every meter in blood. But they did not stop. They could not stop. Too many had died to get them here. Too much had been sacrificed. Min-ji herself led the assault on the central core. Her armor was dented and scorched, her rifle nearly empty. She had lost count of how many enemies she had killed. It did not matter. Only the mission mattered. General, one of her soldiers called out, "The power systems. They are preparing to destroy the station." Min-ji understood immediately. High Arbiter Volan would rather kill everyone on Orbis Prime than let it fall to humans. Millions of innocents, his own people, sacrificed for his pride. "Find the control room," she ordered. Now. They ran through the corridors, fighting through the last defenders. Dr. Kim Yuna's voice crackled over the radio, guiding them through the station's layout. She had studied Concord technology for years. She knew where everything was. "Turn left," she shouted. "The self-destruct controls are in the next chamber." Mingy burst through the door and found herself facing a dozen Concord soldiers guarding a massive console. She did not hesitate. She charged. The fight was brutal and short. Mingy took 3 wounds but kept fighting. Her soldiers fell beside her but kept fighting. When the last enemy dropped, Mingy staggered to the console and began working. "Yuna," she gasped. "Talk me through this." Together, they shut down the self-destruct sequence with seconds to spare. Orbis Prime would not burn today. While Mingy secured the station, Ambassador Han Sunwoo made his way to the council chamber. He walked through halls that had once echoed with laughter at his expense. He passed bodies of soldiers who had fought and died for a leader who did not deserve their loyalty. He felt no joy, only a cold determination to finish what he had started. High Arbiter Volan was waiting for him. The alien sat on his throne, alone. His guards had fled or died. His advisors had abandoned him. He was the last of his kind in the chamber, a king without a kingdom. Sunwoo stopped in front of him. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You came back," Volan said finally. His voice was tired, empty of the contempt it had once held. "I told you I would," Sunwoo replied. Volan laughed, but there was no strength in it. "And what now? Will you kill me? Will you put my head on a spike and parade it through the galaxy?" Sunwoo shook his head. "That is what you would have done. We are not like you." He stepped closer, and Volan flinched. The mighty High Arbiter, who had ruled the galaxy for centuries, was afraid of a single human standing before him. "You called us animals," Sunwoo said quietly. "You said we were violent and primitive. You locked us away because you feared what we might become." He paused. "Perhaps we are savages, but we are savages who survived you. And we are savages who will remember this lesson." Volan said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the battle was ending. The Concord fleet had been destroyed or surrendered. Alliance ships surrounded the station, their weapons silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, Orbis Prime belonged to someone other than the Concord. Admiral Ginho broadcast a message to the galaxy. His face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds, seen by billions of beings from hundreds of species. The war is over," he said. "The Galactic Concord has fallen. The isolation mandate is abolished. A new alliance will take its place, one built on equality, on respect, on the belief that every species deserves a chance to reach for the stars." He paused, and his eyes grew soft. 2 years ago, humanity was rejected by the galaxy. We were called primitive and dangerous. We were told to stay on our planet and wait for extinction. Instead, we chose to fight. Not because we wanted war, but because we wanted freedom. Freedom for ourselves. Freedom for the oppressed. Freedom for anyone brave enough to dream of something better. Behind him, the flags of 4 species flew together: Human, Velen, Duri, and Koroth, the first members of the new stellar union. This is not a human victory, Jinho continued. This is a victory for everyone who was ever told they did not belong. Everyone who was laughed at and pushed aside. Everyone who was told their place was beneath the stars. His voice grew stronger. You feared what we might become. You should have helped us become something better. Remember that, the next time you meet someone reaching for the stars. Remember that a hand extended in friendship is stronger than a door slammed in fear. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under Concord rule for thousands of years began to hope. Some cried, some cheered, some simply sat in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. The old order had fallen. A new dawn was rising. On the bridge of the Sovereign, Captain Wu Jin leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. General Mingi sat in the medical bay, her wounds being treated. Dr. Yuna monitored the station systems, making sure nothing else could go wrong. Ambassador Sunwoo walked through the halls of Orbis Prime, already planning the new government that would rise from the ashes, and Admiral Jinho stood alone at a window. Looking out at the stars, they were the same stars that had been denied to humanity. The same stars that countless humans had looked up at and wondered about. Now they belonged to everyone. Jinho thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. The soldiers, the scientists, the pilots, the workers. They had given everything so that humanity could stand among the stars as equals. He made a silent promise to them. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Humanity would not become what the Concord had been. They would not conquer or oppress. They would build something better, something worthy of the price that had been paid behind him. The first rays of light from Orbis Prime's star crept through the window. A new day was beginning. A new chapter in galactic history. Humanity had tried to join the stars peacefully. When that failed, they had kicked down the door and demanded their place. Now they would help build a galaxy worth belonging to.